At the end of the Civil War, the greatest crisis facing the United States was how to bind the ties, racial, economic, political, and otherwise, that had been disrupted between Northerners and Southerners. With the South in disrepair, millions of freedmen suddenly emancipated from slavery, and early efforts to reunite the Union floundering, a minority of congressional leaders, radical Republicans, tried to legislate the crisis. Those legislators saw it as their responsibility to bring freedom, equality, and political exercise to former bondsmen. In order to achieve success, there was required a radical overhaul of Southern culture and politics. Unfortunately, a combination of disenfranchisement, Jim Crowism, and outright terror in the form of lynch law meant that by the 1880s, Southern blacks found freedoms truncated, opportunities stifled, and the privileges of citizenship erased. Freedmen certainly experienced profound changes during Reconstruction, if only for a brief period. No longer under the grip of a domineering master, freedmen changed their surnames, moved freely, even if only to a neighboring plantation, married those they desired, worshipped according to their own beliefs, and sought educational opportunities. One former enslaved individual from South Carolina described freedom this way: "The master, he says we are all free, but it don't mean we is white, and it don't mean we is equal. Just equal for work, and earn our own living, and not depend on him for no more meats and clothes." Sadly then, these changes, and the freedoms they entailed, were both limited and ephemeral. By the 1960s, fully 100 years after the end of the Civil War, America was on the cusp of the Second Reconstruction. Monumental laws like the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, coupled with the willingness of the federal government to use military might to enforce their legality, brought Southern blacks unparalleled political and social freedoms. But was the South ever truly reconstructed, even as the federal government instituted sweeping changes? In order to fully experience Reconstruction, white Southerners would have had to universally accept blacks as Americans, those imbued with the same legal, social, and political privileges accorded to any other American. However, even today, in an age that has often been characterized as post-racial, race continues to dominate the landscape, and many whites have generally remained unwilling, or at least hesitant, to embrace American blacks as true equals. So what would it mean for the South to be fully reconstructed? Much like utopian fantasy, Southern whites would first have to relinquish several hundred years of history. Many would have to convince themselves that concepts like the Old South and the Lost Cause are no longer relevant. Further, political and social decisions would ideally have to be made in an environment where race and racial implications ceased to have meaning. That utopia may be a dream worth having, but it is yet to become reality. To move from Reconstruction to reconciliation, all Southerners, regardless of race, must be allowed to discuss whatever issues they find arresting in as open, accepting, and non-judgmental environment as is possible. On March 30th, 2007, thousands of Americans continued this process when they converged on what would come to be known as Reconciliation Triangle. They met in order to commemorate the unveiling of a statue on the site of Richmond's most notorious slave market. The amassing of a racially diverse population is clearly a step in the right direction.